Arizona police are supposed to start enforcing that state's controversial new immigration law on Thursday. Meanwhile, a federal judge is considering some legal challenges aimed at preventing it from going into effect. For legal analysis, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Keith Sullivan and defense attorney and former prosecutor Karen DeSoto. Welcome back.
Hello.
Let's get to what's going on here from U.S. District Judge Susan Bolton. She heard all the arguments last week. She appeared to be focusing in on three key issues, and we'll take a look at them one by one. First, the bottom line argument is about the constitutionality of state versus federal government. If the feds aren't enforcing existing laws to the state's satisfaction, Keith, do they have the right to step in?
Absolutely, provided that the statute that they enacted does not contradict federal law. The supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution prevents that from happening. And this law, the language of it, mirrors the federal statute that the feds have not been enacting.
Okay, you agree?
States, well, I don't agree with the legislation in the way that it's written.
But the fact that the states have the right to jump in if the feds are not enforcing.
Usually with state laws, and this happens a lot with conflicting state and federal, the states are allowed to give people more protection. Therefore, the federal government will be that kind of layer of protection, and then if the states feel that their particular states needs more protection, then they are allowed to go ahead and legislate and do that. And
okay,
that's what happens.
Karen, another thing that she's concerned about is the increased burden on law enforcement in terms of checking up on all the immigration status. She says that this it's a very complicated, time-consuming issue right now. The job for the immigration courts, it's not for the cop on the street.
No. It's not, because now, first of all, the way the statute is written, we don't even have to get to that, because I think that the reasonable suspicion standard is what's going to kick it out as far as being too broad. But then, okay, let's go ahead and enforce it. The same way that they haven't enforced the federal laws, they're not going to be able to do the state ones. These police are not going to be trained. How do we even know what reasonable suspicion is? I mean, I have clients who have come through the court system that speak better English than people who are naturalized citizens. So you tell me, how are you going to realize if a person is an immigrant and whether you should ask them for papers? Doesn't make sense.
What do you think, Keith? Is this a job for the immigration courts, or is this a job for the cops on the street?
The only job for the cops on the streets is if they have a reasonable suspicion after a lawful stop, if a person is an illegal immigrant,
give me an example of what we're talking
about. Contact the feds.
What kind of thing can a cop stop someone for and then say, hey, can we check your
anything from a traffic violation to a homicide? And if they have a reasonable suspicion in the course of that investigation that the person is illegal, they pick up the phone, they contact ICE. They're already doing it. This statute...
I don't agree with that, though. That's not how it's written.
This statute, it mirrors the federal statute that the law enforcement authorities are supposed to be following. This statute was to target the sanctuary city of Phoenix, Arizona, and to do the job of the feds, because they're not doing it. And if you read the Department of Justice's brief, their argument is flawed, and I'll go a step further. I'll say that it's outright insulting, because one of the arguments they raise is that we can't have this law because it's going to burden us by forcing us to do our job. And another argument that they raise, because remember, the country of Mexico filed an amicus brief to the court saying we condemn this law, and it's going to mess up foreign relations because Mexico doesn't like the law.
Okay, but it's a law that, Karen, you're saying it's not clear how it's been written. And so it opens up all sorts of constitutional violations.
Yeah, because you're infringing on everybody's freedom. You know what? In the state of Arizona, nobody's going to argue that people are being murdered. There's terrorism threats. Listen, we understand that somebody has to do something about immigration. We all understand that. You know, it's kind of like an airplane. You know, when the mask drops and they tell you, don't assist your kids, put it on first and then assist others? Well, that's what's happening. People are being murdered. There's terrorism threats. It's draining the resources. We're going under, so somebody needs to help. But you don't have to do it by impinging on everybody's freedom, by insulting people, by saying, hey, can I see your papers? There's no way that you could enforce something like that, ever.
Okay, quick last word.
I think Karen's right, but what's important here is that if no one is going to provide the blanket of protection and security that the Arizona residents deserve, the federal government should not criticize them for going out and obtaining it on their own. And the United States Supreme Court has original jurisdiction of this case, so this certainly will go up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay, let's leave it there then, because you all have agreed. It's all good. Thank you very much, Keith Sullivan and Karen DeSoto. Thanks. The dangerous heat wave continues.